The Strait of Hormuz being closed after reopened and the increasing Chinese soybean imports and its impacts on agricultural commodity prices. Jerry Goodell is ready to assess all of that and more right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. Hi, Jerry. So we have had a week that we had a lot of back and forth in the negotiations between the United States and Iran, and with Pakistan being the mediator. On Friday, we have had the announcement that the Strait of Hormuz was being reopened, and the crude oil prices had tumbled, but as of this morning on Saturday, we have had news about restrictions again in that part of the world.
Yes, it has been a topsy-turvy week here and what's going on in the Mideast. First, we were disappointed by the U.S. and uh, Iran's lack of progress on any type of deal last weekend, and that then it weakened up. Uh, the markets tried to get some enthusiasm going because of the fact that things had calmed down. It supposedly uh, in those talks from there. But then we had, like you said, commentary here. I don't know if it was negotiating employees or just what was going on. Both sides talked about opening the Straits of Hormuz and that. But the one thing that the U.S. Uh, and Trump decided that they were still going to go ahead and blockade the Iranian ports. So I'm not sure how that works because there's so many boats already sitting in the straits there and that. And I'm not sure how. I didn't think they had any real particular military uh, ships of any quantity in there to do a blockade of shipments of oil out of various ports in Iran. But anyway, that's the statement that was out. And that particular situation, I guess, turned out that the Iranians decided that if the straits are going to be opened up, but our ports are going to be closed, then the straits are closed. So that happened this morning here on Saturday. And wow. I don't know what that means as we go to Sunday night, but I don't think that prices are going for energy and to some extent, even the agriculturals here aren't going to have some recovery here because of that statement.
Yeah, so if nothing changes, I guess it's pretty much certain that the oil prices will go up again.
Right. And to some extent, uh, not, I think that I heard the prices on Friday were in the 80s after being, over 110, I think it was last week. And that's quite a volatile situation. I don't know where that means Sunday night's prices are going to beat for world crude oil prices on the New York Mercantile Exchange. But at this point, the Mideast situation continues to be the barometer here of what's going on in prices, it seems like around the world. And right now, at least, there doesn't seem to be any trust from either side here. There, for a while, there was some talk that uh, even this concept that there was going to be some type of extraction of Iranian uranium at this point, which is seemed like a surprising situation to me at this time. To some extent, uh, there's a possibility that the U.S. could monitor, make sure that there's nothing happening with that uranium that they already have. But I don't sense there's a real strong possibility that the Iranians are going to let us truck it out of there. somewhere. And at this point, that's not the easiest thing in the world to do, is to transfer your uranium uh, scenario to some other place of the world. That's that is not the easiest thing to do without a tremendous amount of effort and at this point, very dangerous situation. I don't think everybody wants to move it around all that much. But anyway, that is still a major factor in here long term. If the U.S. can get into a better monitoring situation for it, maybe it can stay there. But that hasn't been coming up just yet.
Yeah, so during the week we also have a report about the overall Chinese soybean imports, and the number was 15% higher year over year, and that is attributed mostly to the imports from Brazil.
Yes, yes. Well, the Chinese, uh, well, uh, a year ago, surprisingly, they were slow in the trigger of moving some of their or getting the movements out of South America. This year, they have been pretty strong, partly, I think, because the Brazilians wanted to move it, and to some extent, I think that was this whole issue about the early soybean conditions down there in Brazil being uh, somewhat the moisture of the crop was not ideal. It You want soybeans shipments to be really below 13, closer to 12% moisture when you do that. And there was a lot of beans that they wanted to move because they don't really have the kind of moisture and type of system to keep beans very long. And so they were pushing them out there. Well, interesting over the last 6 or 8 weeks, as we've been seeing here in the international news, was that China was not excited about the quality of the beans they were getting from Brazil. And that issue finally boiled over. With supposedly, well, reports here that they sent back 22 to 25 cargoes of soybeans back to Brazil or someplace else. I don't know if they'll end up back in Brazil, but they're definitely coming out of the Chinese ports and that. And so that's a big feature. Despite those particular quantities we're talking about, they're still during the month of March. You're exactly right. China received 12 to 15% more beans than it did the year before. And they still got quite a commitment with Brazil. I think they're still going, despite this kerfuffle about moisture of the beans in the early shipments.
Yeah, most of the reports are still pointing out of a record crop in Brazil,
Oh,
but I don't think that's going to be the case for Argentina. So
yeah, Argentina is a real interesting one at this point. Of course, they have swift as because of the demand that happened in corn last year from uh, uh, in the world markets and that, and really from China at this point, they switched a higher percentage of their plantings down there to corn. And so we were talking 51, 52 in beans last year. Now they're talking about 48 million metric tons. And then the one interesting twist on it here is that the recent rains in Argentina have really slowed down their harvest down there in the area of, I suppose, Cordoba and Santa Fe. Uh, sa- uh, Areas south of there in La Pampa still on the dry side, even parts of Buenos Aires. But ends up that uh, that's really become a, a point of contention down there in Argentina, and that optimism abounds on what this additional moisture has been recently for the corn crop down there. There's been the USDA's projections are in the mid 50s, stuff like that. There's been talk as high as 68 million metric tons and coming out of Argentina on corn. I don't think that's going to happen. There's a recent update from uh, The Argentine government of 61 million metric tons. That's still a huge increase. For practical purposes here, you're talking about a 15 to 20% increase in corn down there. The problem is, if it keeps on raining, that's the same quality issues that might have impacted some of the issues on soybeans in Brazil, and definitely a factor there. Argentina doesn't have any more drying facilities and on the shipments and things like that either. So they're going to have to hope like heck that the rains stop and they get it dried down before they get in the boats because uh, unfortunately, corn probably is more susceptible to issues in transportation if it's not dried down in good shape before you put it in the boat. It can turn moldy and bad pretty damn fast. So I think there's a surprisingly the crop sizes in South America are pretty strong this year, or potentially strong, but yet their harvest situation with the moisture is definitely messing up their quality.
Yeah, and on this side of the world, in the U.S., we are still having reports of dry weather in many parts of the country, and that will have a significant impact on the planting.
Well, it's really an interesting situation here. Like you mentioned, it's we've got this dry conditions really impacting the winter wheat areas in Kansas, some of Oklahoma, but really the Texas Panhandle, which is where the a significant amount of winter wheat's also planted, and and parts of western Nebraska and Colorado. And so that's the interesting twist about it here. The rain activity that's really impacting eastern Nebraska, Missouri, parts of eastern Kansas, on through uh, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. In Indiana and Ohio, it's really been the northern areas versus the southern areas. So it's not as delaying things here, but the one thing that's been up and down is temperatures, and we're supposed to be back in the cool side of things going forward here for next week. So we got two things happening here in the U.S. weather. Like you mentioned, the dryness in winter wheat. We're still, it potentially could be quite damaging if it stays dry out there through the middle of May. There's still a potential if we get a gully washer or at least 1 to 2 inch rains out in those areas you just mentioned in western Kansas and Texas and Colorado, Nebraska, we could still have a solid crop, but I'm not sure that we've got the biggest prospects with that. While at the same time, the rain activity, I got another 3/4 of an inch last night. Earlier this week, I got 3 inches. So, in my backyard. Now, it's guaranteed this is not all over the Midwest and things like that, but right now it looks like the month of April we're approaching double our normal amount of rains in certain areas I just mentioned, from uh, eastern Iowa all the way to Michigan at this point. So definitely a factor in here that's going to limit our
So,
planning
so
progress
how
on
you're
this.
seeing prices at this point with all this combination that is changing so rapidly?
It is. I definitely feel like this market's still going to rebound here, and that I guess the interesting thing about it is that the investors in the U.S. here have been cautious as this thing kind of rebounds towards the recent highs. Wheat probably is the one that is the one that could potentially make a difference here about expanding the recent ranges. We were up near the highs this week and then backed off on late week. And that if we get above that 650 level on spot May wheat in Kansas City, that could be a significant factor there to help lead all the prices up. And it depends a lot on the rhetoric we get out of the Midwest, or Mideast, I should say, on that and what's going on in the between Iran and the U.S. But the biggest thing right now is that we're not hugely behind yet on U.S. plantings of corn and soybeans, even with this wet weather at this point, and to some extent, the two-bladed soy. Once things kind of open up and we get some corn plantings and bean plantings here, and we surprisingly had a pretty jump in beans last week as the Delta jumped in there and planted a lot of beans, and that then. We're in a situation where it could be a flash up on issues about getting in the ground, but once it is in the ground, there's going to be moisture there to get the crop off to a good start. So I think people got to keep that in mind and look to utilize some strengths here. I guess the wheat market, I guess I give it a little room there because of that 650 W top that we've had on that May Kansas City. If that does take off, that could make a significant dollar or more rally in that market, which is like, what? Where's that coming from? It's mostly from the charts that are sitting out there on wheat in Kansas City, and that's definitely a big factor. Yeah, Texas, Kansas, Nebraska. And Oklahoma are the big producers. If the yields out there in winter wheat in the U.S. aren't there, that's big difference, and that can make a big price change in
Well, one
that
very
market.
quick question for those who still have something in the beans there. What do you think is the ideal price to sell considering this skyrocketing prices of fertilizer for the upcoming crops?
Oh, that's an interesting one to say the least. Uh, uh, haven't really been interested in selling new crop kind of values here because of what you just mentioned here, the high cost of fertilizer for corn and for corn really, and to some extent there's some fertilizers on wheat too. Not so much on the fertilizer costs on soybeans are modest at this point overall, but that's the reason why I'd probably. I guess hang back if we kind of move up dramatically in Kansas City. We still have to sell some old crop, and I would probably, if we had a pump, as I said, 50 to 75 cents or more, I'd probably start selling some new crop wheat, just because. Uh, this market's going to be very fickle once it finally calms down and the wheat harvest is ahead of us. We've got to keep that in mind. But right now, at least you got to do that. On the corn side of things, uh, we've got a big pile of that still around. So that's another one that I would definitely take advantage of. If we got close to the $5 mark in spot corn prices, I would be moving that up to the 75, 80%. Beans are a tricky one. Uh, right now, at least, I'd probably want to sell those into the 60 to 80% level, but yeah, right at this point, you've got to utilize bounces and prices. If we ever have peace break out, this market's going to be pretty dull because we've got plenty of moisture in the ground here in the Midwest.
All right, thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
Sounds good, sir. Take care.